Okay, hello. I think this is working. Pretty sure. Let's get the chat up. I know that some people were here waiting for the stream to start, which is exciting. We've got a group of people ready to go. Let's see, docs and chat. Beautiful. Okay. Hi, everybody. I have had some streaming problems lately, so I had to wake up and figure that out this morning. But we're here. This is the best part of this channel is book club. It's the most fun thing to do for me and the most rewarding. And yeah, so normally the past couple times I've been kind of like waiting at the start for people to join in, and I feel like I'm just getting warmed up and don't quite know what to say about the book. This is slightly different in that I do have a story about reading this book and having an anxiety slash panic attack on an airplane, in large part due to this book and also other things too. But so I feel like I've got a good story to share about the book, and also we've got a lot of people that are here and ready to talk about their experiences with the book and what they felt about it, and we can ask questions and devise some answers for each other. So I think if it's okay with y'all, I will just share my near-death experience I had reading this book. Um, and then while I'm doing that, maybe if you want to type in the chat some of your experiences of reading this book, and then maybe some overall impressions, questions, ideas, takes that you had about the book, um, then we can do it. Uh, I will say another asterisk to this is that I feel like the past few book clubs, I've like written notes and um, more or less had to like conjure up some things to say. This book, I had such an intense experience with and really liked a lot. So I don't have anything really prepared, which may even be better for this experience. So okay, here's my story about reading um, this excellent book, When We Cease to Understand the World, which I'm so glad we read this month. Um, I was in Seattle maybe 2.5, 2-ish weeks ago. This was for um, when I met up with David Shields, and we did the interview and went to the WWE and had this whole experience and filmed a few videos together. I I was there for essentially 36 hours, and after I met David on Friday, we filmed. We hung out, we filmed, did an interview, and then on Friday night we went to the WWE. The very next day, Saturday morning in Seattle, I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy this book. I found it at I think a well-known bookstore that I can't remember the name of, um, and I bought the book. Immediately went to a park, started reading it, and I've read the first maybe 5 pages of this book 3 to 4 times. Um, and I read it because the Google preview. Um, this book has been recommended to me by Jess Roberts, who's in the chat. It's been recommended to me. It was first recommended to me by David Shields when he read the copy of my draft of the book Lightspeed that I had finished in July. Just some like themes that were similar, and I always knew that I wanted to read it, so I had Google Preview read it several times, so I was familiar with the language and the yeah, there's this like confidence in the book, in that there's not a lot of language wise, there's not a lot of flourish to the the writing, at least in the translation, and I don't imagine there's a lot of flourish in the original, in the Spanish. Um, and I like a book that is confident enough in what it's going to do, that, you know, the first sentence and the second sentence, they're really well written, but they don't have to like stun you. I think that's a problem that I have had in my writing a lot. It's like trying to just stun people over and over with language, and it comes from a lack of confidence in the subject and what the book can do. I didn't get that at all in my mini readings of the beginning of this book. But then I sat in the park and actually started reading it, and the first kind of essay, you know, the first section of the book is, I believe it's Prussian Blue. Maybe I've got that wrong. Yeah, it's Prussian Blue, which is just this devastating um, essay, and that kind of set the tone for the day. I was like exhausted from the night before and from traveling and from like just uh, meeting David and doing this whole thing. I was watching people play soccer in the park. Somebody got their head uh, somebody hit their a soccer ball errantly like flew and hit someone's head. Um, and then I read Prussian Blue just at the park really quick. Read through it really quick. Was really affected by it. I thought it was really, really, really good in that. Well, we can get into like more of the book later, but this is just my kind of first experience reading it. Then I went to University of Washington campus, and I was going to go to the library. All the libraries were closed. I sat outside and read maybe 2 hours. And during that time, behind in the building behind me, there was like a tribal drum, uh, either show or like demonstration. So from the building behind me, there were like very loud drums and people yelling and people like going in and out um, of this show that was being played. And then in front of the library, there was a what I think was a K-pop uh, club, university club, because the people that were in this like K-pop group that had assembled to film a video in a dance were not very good, but they seemed to have a lot of spirit. So I had K-pop dancing in front of me, tribal, very loud drumming behind me, and I was reading through probably another 70 pages of this book, um, 75 pages of this book in that weird, feverish kind of environment. Um, and was like, it was just this like perfect uh, overtone to what was happening in the book. Um, okay, and then here's the crux of the story. I went to eat pho right before I left. I thought maybe Seattle has good pho. Let's try. Went to eat pho. This pho place was, the food was not good, and it had a like food poisoning kind of quality to it. There's this weird like sickly sweetness to what I was eating. I stopped eating. But I had enough to be like, oh no, am I going to get food poisoning in T minus 4 hours? Well, T minus 4 hours had me sitting on a plane, flying home, and reading this book. Uh, and at that point, I was like getting close to the end of the book. I was tearing through it. I loved it. I was like deeply affected by it. I thought it was really good. And then I'm not afraid of riding in planes. I feel like I've flown in planes a normal amount. I'm not a frequent flyer, but I'm used to flying in planes. And turbulence, all that stuff doesn't freak me out. I feel fine. I don't get I don't get sick on planes, nothing like that. Um, but what happened was we were getting close to landing. I was on the window seat. There were two people on to the left of me, and we caught like an air pocket in the plane, and something happened with like all of the set of what I just told you. Reading when we cease to understand the world in basically one day, tearing through it. The person getting their head hit by the soccer ball, the tribal drums behind me, the like kind of bad K-pop group, the pho that I was excited to eat that was potentially going to give me food poisoning, like on the plane. And then we hit an air pocket that was like turbulence, but this weird kind of turbulence that felt like we were just like about to, like, that felt like the plane was about to like drop 100 feet. You know that feeling in an elevator when you're like not grounded? And we just caught an air pocket like that, and it lasted for, I don't know, probably 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, my stomach turned over. It was the first time I think I've ever experienced that, like total seasick nausea. And the experience was so intense, and the book this book was so intense that I just immediately had a panic attack. I had thought I felt like passing out or throwing up, which is not nice to talk about at this hour, but it's true. And I thought, oh my God, I cannot, if I throw up, I'm going to be, I'm like stuck in the seat right now. We were also like very close to landing. So I felt like I can't really like ask these people to get up, you know? This is the part where like all of the flight attendants are like buckled up in the back and stuff. So I just had this like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to pass out right now, or I'm going to throw up in the plane. So I just like deep breathing while I was having this panic attack. I had to close my eyes and just like hold on tight. But what happened was this experience, this like panic attacky experience, once we landed, didn't go away. I remember like looking up the corridor of the plane, still like feeling very like not like euphoric, but it was one of the weirdest experiences of my life because it was like panic attack plus, and I felt like my feet weren't really touching the ground, and then the corridor of the plane seemed to like stretch on like comically long, like it would in a movie or something. And yeah, basically this was kind of onset by the content and the theme of this book that has this like epistemological darkness, you know, this like unknowability at the center of humans' deepest, of humans' quest for understanding. There's this like uh, dark unknowing that this book seemed to like conjure up so well, and the kind of mania that people had once they touched that that the surface of that reality. Um, and I feel like I touched the surface of that reality by eating weird pho. Okay, end of the story is that I finished the book. I loved it. I didn't get food poisoning. My panic attack, weird thing faded away after like an hour and a half or so. And here we are talking about this book. So I am now going to like read off all the comments, hear about your takes on the book, and we can just generate a discussion. I was going to reread it before we started this book club. But I liked the book so much, and I feel like it could potentially be one of my favorite books. Um, in general, maybe of all time or of the year, or it had that much of an effect on me, and especially because I couldn't really figure out necessarily why it was working so well. And I love when I don't know how books do what they do. Um, but I decided not to reread it because I wanted to have some I wanted fewer takes and to hear everyone's experiences with the book um, in book club, and then maybe reread it with everyone else's perspectives on the book. And I feel like it will take a lot of our perspectives for me and for us to like understand maybe how this book works and why it was so affecting to me. Um, so I just want to briefly start and say hi, Nixie. Hi, Jess. Hi, TJ. Thanks for joining the book club for your first time. It's super fun. It'll be a good time today. Girl in Dungarees. Hi. Alif was just thinking about me. Fantastic. Felix is here. Hello. Turning the Tables is here. Hello. Okay, so Nixie said, my thoughts about the first few pages was, God damn, it's Nazis again, but I'm so glad I pushed through that part and got to experience the rest. Yeah, for sure. I did. I thought this was going to be more about Goering and the like Nazi crimes of science, but it was really not. That was the first page or two or three, and then we moved on. That was cool to follow, not a character, but something kind of like ephemeral. Follow Prussian blue. Follow the chemical rather than a character. It's like that's just speaks to me and my sensibilities. Like there's so many. I'm becoming like less of a fiction, like conventional fiction reader, kind of. I don't know if I can fully say that. But to like not follow a character and to follow a thing, an object of study or science, an object of development, that was really cool. Prussian Blue was maybe the most effective part of the book for me, at least at first. Jess says, shout out Pho. I agree. It's my great joy, but not the Pho I ate in Seattle. Turning the Tables, Connor says, read this on a ski resort in a rural Canadian town. That's cool. Yeah, Girl in Dungarees. The second half of the book was already a fever dream. Truly, truly, the dream sequences, it was very clear that this had moved from like a nonfiction book to a pretty deeply fictional one. Those parts of the book, I don't know if they were horror, as horrific as the nonfiction to begin the book, but the dream sequences were wild. Okay, so Jess says, trying to decipher the notes I took when reading it the first time a year or so ago. I remember being super taken by the ending, the lemon tree producing such exuberance before it dies. Yeah, it felt like the state of the world currently, but also the irony of not knowing how long a citrus tree has to live unless you cut it down. It seemed to relate to the novel's descriptions of our relentless use of quantum mechanics, or I suppose the desire to acquire knowledge no matter the cost, maybe one of the main themes. That's cool. Maybe let's unpack that for a while. I thought some of the ending, so it goes into this very interesting mode, and I think y'all will know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I had the same notes, like overabundance before death equals humankind. Cutting it down and looking inside equals science. That's pretty obvious notes, but I think I agreed with you there, Jess. What I found was interesting is that, yeah, the whole Night Gardener section, I don't know if I found like that as effective, but I'm interested to hear what everyone thought of that part, because the book moves from like basically nonfiction and increasingly more fiction to the end, and then in the Gardener, I felt we had like a completely fictional story. And I don't know, maybe it's because I was having a panic attack at that moment, but that seemed slightly less effective for me. But I also wouldn't know how else to end the book. I think maybe it was less effective for me because I actually didn't know how the book was working anymore. Beyond maybe the first essay, Prussian Blue, I really didn't understand how this book worked, which you don't have to. Like, in the sense, the book became magic to me because I couldn't figure it out. But that part, the Night Gardener, that like 5 or 4 or 6 part little mini fictional ending, I couldn't really wrap my head around its function. I knew that it was working, but maybe I thought it was less effective than the rest of the book. And yet, like Jess said, like it becomes very clear the kind of thematic endpoint that we've wound up at. So maybe that was its aim. Okay, so Girl in Dungarees says, also love the book. It felt like a STEM fanfic. Yeah, and I wish I read it when I was in university still. It turned the men in my textbook into actual people, and I just wish I had been closer to their work while reading it. Yeah, that's cool. STEM fanfic, that's a great take on this book. TJ said page 53, there's a scene that reminded me of that Tolstoy quote, "It's time to die, and I'm still thinking up things," that you had read out. Asa's here. Hi, Asa. Everyone who's in the chat. Asa is a fantastic writer, and a very diligent communicator of the writing process, who also has a YouTube channel. You can click on the probably just their profile picture in the chat, or just type in Asa Merritt. They have a really good YouTube channel, and they're a horror writer who can probably help us unpack this book in very effective ways. So Asa asks, one question I definitely had was, to what extent are we expected as readers going in to know it's fiction / nonfiction? And hello from Mexico City. That is a great question. I have takes on this, but I feel like they're mostly like in regard to my personal taste and like my growing quest to kind of unpack this fiction, nonfiction dichotomy. So let me just give my brief take on this, and we can see how this lands. And maybe this is a kind of forced analogy, but I'll try it out. I will say that diving deeper into, so the first book we read for book club was John D'Agata, About a Mountain. I didn't know that book was controversial at all, but it was in the sense that John D'Agata advocates for this kind of like essay form, not nonfiction, not journalism, but essay. And that means you kind of take the world and reality and you perspectivize it, meaning like you just admit that if you are telling a story about anything, be it from your imagination, i.e. fiction, or from fact or source material, i.e. nonfiction, as long as you're telling about something, it is going to have a perspective, meaning it's not going to be true or able to give the actual truth or essence of any given moment. As soon as you start to tell a narrative or tell anything, you shape and you change. I think the analogy that may be a little bit forced is like the quantum observer. I forget the name of it. He talks about it in this book, and it's a pretty well-known effect. But basically, the observer effect, right? When you study a particle or a wave or a particle, when you study something, when you observe it, you're changing its behavior by your observation. That's well known, and that's at the core of quantum understanding of science, is that observation changes reality. I think potentially maybe this is a forced take, but I think that there's something happening in contemporary literature where, I go back to like David Foster Wallace, who had this like extreme discomfort with the conventions of fiction. And so he wrote Infinite Jest, that was this like meta fiction to try and get past this discomfort with what truth looks like in an invented world. And then you go to Nausgard, who was like, I'm going to write just from my experience. I'm going to write autofiction, tell the truth, no invention at all. And then I feel like you have these other people like Benjamin Labatut, and you have John DeGata, and you have Sheila Heti. You have even, I would say, maybe Catherine Scanlon is entering into this world or is adjacent to this world, where people are saying, like, actually, it's not fiction or invention that we need to bolster or make more true or closer to reality. Like, let's take nonfiction or essay and let's bend that to, like, basically, as soon as we observe a particle, we're going to change it. As soon as we tell a story, it's not going to be journalistic or real or true. I don't know. That's my forced take about the fiction nonfiction thing in this book. I think this is an idea that I will be working out for years, and that we together will be working out for a long time. Um, but some of the critiques of this book, of When We Cease to Understand the World, were for that very fact, that we are led to believe in the first essay that this, and in the form and style of it, that this is a nonfiction book. And then it's not very clear, unless you're fact checking all of these narratives, it's not very clear until we get to the dream sequences what's been manipulated to be more like narratively poignant and what hasn't. So that's my take. I'm not sure. So Felix says, I thought the first story was very much apart from the subsequent ones. Prussian Blue felt like a beautiful wiki deep dive. Yeah. Also, Levatut said that the stories become more fictional as they go on. Yep, exactly. Nixie said, I feel like the smoothness with which the book moves from one person to another adds to the confusion and fever dream feeling. I was so lost all the time. I love the epilogue and Night Gardener so much. Oh, wow, amazing. Okay. That's interesting, Nixie, because I had the opposite, not opposite experience, but I like that you had that experience of reading it, where like trying to read for what is happening, trying to read for the characters wasn't really, the book wasn't allowing that. It was but I liked that. I think I liked it because I'm interested in books that work without character. And this is a book that had these people in it, and especially like the Japanese mathematician I was very deeply interested in. And I think that person is mostly invented, which is fascinating to me because they were as real as, they were like capital R real when I was reading the book. And maybe they are an actual person, but the story and the narrative around this kind of like mathematical heart of darkness is not true or fictionalized in some way. Anyway, I felt comfortable, I guess, reading a book that used either like in Prussian Blue, the book followed the chemical instead of the characters. And in other parts of the book, I think it followed this theme um, rather than the characters, which is inspiring to me. And we should put a pin in that for my book, Lightspeed, because I feel like that's what I hope to do with it. And I have no idea how to do that, or had no idea how to do that in my initial draftings. But maybe this book can be a teacher in that way, how to follow a theme and have that guide the book rather than a set of characters. So that's a good read. Let's see. Jess says, rereading it, there's a moment on page 181 where the gardener tells the narrator about the guy who invented nitrogen fertilizers and how he simultaneously killed and saved so many people. Yeah. Also, meta, like if this narrator is a self-insert, are we witnessing Labatut gain the inspiration for this book? I actually had that. That's a really sharp reading, Jess, because I had a suspicion in the Night Gardener that the Night Gardener or the person, the gardener, the person that the gardener is talking to and is narrating it is Labatut, like what's that jazz, Toni Morrison jazz, when like the very first line of the book, she like sucks her teeth and says like, I'm going to tell it this way. That's Toni Morrison just deciding this is how she's going to tell the book. So Toni Morrison is this like self-insert into jazz. I feel like at the end, that's a really sharp reading, is that I was kind of on the fence. Is like, is this Labatut in Night Gardener? Like, is he the one narrating this story? And I think it's obviously at best implied, but I think it's a sharp reading in that we're witnessing Labatut gain the inspiration for this book. It's really cool. Oh, I also want to say I watched this video because I was so stunned by the book. I wanted to learn more about Labatut, and he had this really cool quote about writing that I feel like is relating more and more to the kind of writing that I'm just getting more fascinated by. And he said that, like, rather than invention or creation, like writing to him feels more like taking a walk and gathering things up along the way. In referring to like research, that research is his primary writing process, and that he's taking a walk and gathering up all these bits of research. And he also said that like, I don't have to like invent the best phrase or like create the best phrase. Like, I just pick up and find them for all over the place for my research. And I love that collage kind of writing that's happening. Like Sebald, who was an enemy of mine, but I think I'm beginning to understand more and more. Or we still have a contemptuous relationship, but Sebald like essentially told his students, like, you know, if you find, it's the same thing, like pick up things as you take your walk through research and fiction and reading and all this stuff, and pick things up, and by your very picking them up and misunderstanding them and tweaking them, you're creating something through that collage. So anyway, that's just an interesting thing about Labatut's process. And I'll just put a note too that like a few years ago, I listened to someone who had just published a book give this advice that always struck me in the wrong way. And they said that if you're researching for a book, then you know that you're doing the wrong thing. Like if you're not just writing from your experience or from something that has happened to you, you're already in the wrong you're already in the wrong. And I was like, man, I couldn't quite pin down, but I was like, I just really don't agree with that. Um, and so, anyway, that's all I have to say. Um, Felix says Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. That's it. That is it. That's what I was talking about with the observer effect. Felix, it's like cutting down a citrus tree to find out how long it has to live. Exactly. The Night Gardener section making more and more sense now. I'm very excited to read this book again because now the ending, I feel like I will give a lot more of a chance, and to see its kind of like thematic reverberations throughout the whole book, which is what everyone here seems to have read in it. And I was like, I don't know. So it's cool to be able to read it again with everyone's perspective on how it's a really effective end to the book. Girl in Duggery said, yeah, that's a very fun link between the book picks so far and going further. We've read Exteriors, which is all about observation. Very, 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 very true. Cool, Asa. Very good analogy for how this book works. It's like a relay team. The baton being uncontrolled science. The baton being uncontrolled science. The racers, the scientists, and we're following both the baton and the racer that has the baton. Really good way to think about how to write a book like this. You're not writing the racer, you're writing this baton that's being passed between racers. So at times you're writing about the racer who's holding the baton. At times you're talking about the baton itself, and that baton is being passed, and your perspective is changing as you go around the book. That's really effective to think about how a theme can drive the perspective of a book. Jess says, which in witnessing him gain the inspiration for the book at the end, I don't know. I think it contributes to how dizzying and circular the novel is. Prussian blue in particular, tying a bow on the form of the novel. Wow. Okay. That's a great, I feel like I have to read this book again because what I feel like everyone's perspective is helping me understand how this book works a little bit more. I think at a certain point, like, this book has its own heart of darkness, and I think the best books are just going to be magic, and the writer themselves doesn't know how it works. They're just finding something, and there's some problem at the core of the book, not like an issue with the book, but some unresolved thing at the core of the book that just can never be understood. Like, I think those are the most excellent books for me. Sheila Heti's Pure Color, this book, what's another one that just kind of V.S. Naipaul, Jack's Garden, which is like a mini novel in the Enigma of Arrival, about a mountain in a way. Maybe that book is more, I like that book a lot because I can understand it a little bit more, but there are parts of that book where it has its own like unknowability at the core of it. I think my goal in my writing life is to write one book that I don't and cannot understand. At its very core, there's just something that's like beyond conception. And I think if you can write a book like that as a writer, if you can write one book like that in your career as a writer, you've done it. That's great. You've done enough. And there's writers that I really like who've never written a book like that. Those are the rare few books that are magic and remain magic for. Those are the books. I think Asa had a video about Forever Stories. those are forever stories where there's something at their heart that just you can't like unpack in a formal way, like in a formal sense, how it's working. Um, I want to read Jess's comment again, which in witnessing him gain the inspiration for the book at the end, I think it contributes to how dizzying and circular the novel is. Prussian Blue in particular tying a bow on the form of the novel. Cool. Yeah, I'm interested in that dizzying. Yeah. Hmm. That's interesting. Okay, so I want to know. I think we had Asa who brought up the fiction nonfiction thing, which I don't think is an essential. We could talk about this book and not talk about the fact that it goes from essentially a nonfiction book in Prussian Blue and moves its way into almost entirely book a book of fiction in the Night Gardener section. But if anyone wants to talk about that, or maybe if there are problems with that, like I don't know. I think I'm interested in what everyone thinks about this idea that I've been having. It's not a new idea, or that I'm having myself alone, but what I was talking about earlier, like that even in a book of nonfiction, even in journalism, where if you tell something, if you narrate something, especially if you have add narrative to something, there is just no way to to tell something and capture its essence. And you know, a lot of people have argued that there is no essence to capture. But there are a lot of people who have some pretty strong feelings and objections to what Labatut's doing, and especially what John D'Agata is doing, um, having the appearance of a nonfiction form, but in the background altering details and facts and taking things from many sources and collecting them like Sebald does. You know, there are all of these writers that I've talked about have all had like pretty strong critiques either of that method or of like Sebald, Austerlitz. There's a major critique of that book in that he essentially, took, maybe you could use a different word. I think he would use a different word if he was still alive. He was inspired by someone's personal narrative, and like he suggested to his students, he picked parts of it and kind of the structure of someone's personal narrative and created what I think is an incredible book, based off of that narrative. And the person recognized that, hey, this is my fucking life, that this person has like adapted and made this other thing, and they were very upset about that. And I think it's a valid point. And yet some part of me thinks like, man, but I just read a biography for the research that I'm doing for my book, and at this point of reading this biography, I'm in like 6+ months of research, so I have a really good idea of my interpretation of who this person, this scientist is that I'm reading about. In this biography, we're reading the same sources. Like I go through the back of the book. I'm reading the bibliography. I'm like, I've read that book. I've read that article. I've read that book. I've read those journals. And this person has presented a totally different character than the one I am reading. And this character is based on a real person, and we're basing our understanding of this real person on these source materials, and we have a totally different view of who this person is. I feel like this biographer had this idea. This is hugely unfair. But I feel like this biographer had this idea like, okay, in order to sell this book, I have to have this person mean this, be this meaningful to the subject, the scientific subject, um, in order to sell a bunch of books and say, hey, this person was a major player, a huge, significant scientist for this subject. My reading is that it's much more complicated. He was obsessed with fame. He didn't contribute at very key times when he could have contributed, when a lot of his peers were begging him to. Instead, he was obsessed with fame. He liked power. And none of that stuff really enters into this book. And I feel like it shades the person, complexifies them, in ways that this biography didn't address. So I think, okay, this is a bad biography, in my opinion, because I feel like I know this person pretty well. But then I also think, oh, here's another example of two people reading the same things, seeing the same things, using the same source material, and coming out with vastly different subjective experiences of this, essential reality, this who was a real person. So anyway, I don't know what I'm getting at. I'm just saying that this whole idea of manipulating truth, or the landscape of nonfiction, which is reality, based in reality, I feel like I don't have a problem with, and I understand really well. Having written a lot, I'm like, there's no way to not manipulate. And I also understand there's a lot of criticism of it, and people are kind of rightly very suspicious of what people who take this approach to writing, to fiction, to nonfiction, take this kind of formal approach, what the kind of implications are. They're very suspicious about it. So anyway, let's see what y'all think about this. Girl in Dungarees, do you know which paragraph in Prussian Blue was fiction? I do not know. Maybe there's something online that could tell us, but I think that's such a cool, what better to like make a book persistently interesting than to be like, oh yeah, that part that you read past and had no idea, that was totally made up. And people are like, wait, what part? It all seemed real to me. There's that's such a great selling tactic of a book. Not that that's what Labatut had in mind, but when you have some sort of blatant mystery, there's something to that that's like, wait, I want to know what part of this book was fiction. I'm going to look that up more. What is this about? I think that's such a cool way to get people to re-engage with a book over the years, So Girl in Dungarees, I feel like lies, masking, and truth was a central theme of About a Mountain, so it feels so consistent in the theme to make the book a mix. I feel like lies masking as truth was a central theme of About a Mountain. Yes. It feels consistent in the theme. Yeah, okay. So to make fiction and nonfiction a mix in the book. Yeah, 100%. It goes back to manipulating the truth with observation. Yeah, exactly. Jess, I'm not sure. I felt like the chaotic threads in this book, connecting seemingly unconnected things, gave me more sense of an essence of humanity than any hyper-realistic, detailed work of fiction. I agree. I definitely agree. That's such a great way of saying that. I might have to read that again. Jess, I'm not sure. I felt like the chaotic threads in this book, connecting seemingly unconnected things, gave me more sense of an essence of humanity. Wow. I think that's a really, I think you're getting at something that I feel in my writing, in that this I also, let me just put a caveat in here and say that I don't think, I'm just talking about like my growing aesthetic as a writer and reader, but I still am reading Harry Potter. Love Harry Potter. Uh I'm still reading Tolstoy, Anna Karenina, and I love it. There's so much to fiction. I mean, fiction is what got me into writing. It's what I don't know if I'll ever consider myself a nonfiction writer, although the what I have that's pushing me forward is more and more based in reality. But I feel like I'm doing it from a fiction writer's perspective. Like, I'll always be a fiction writer, even if the book says nonfiction or essay under it, if that makes sense. Like, there's something that this way of telling nonfiction reality and telling it with the awareness that if I'm telling it, it's already going to be fiction, it's already going to be subjective and totally my perspective, that feels closer to like what David Foster Wallace was so uncomfortable with and trying to get at, 30 years ago or whatever, or that, you know, Nausgard was trying to do in My Struggle. Like, I feel like it's to get at the essence, and you're doing it this way that, like, it's to get at the essence of human experience, and you're doing it with this way of, like, essentially saying there is no objective essence, but okay. And then you get at the contradiction of these things are just unspeakable. But I really like that observation, and it's something that, yeah, this is just a theme in my life and my artistic life that I'm working out. In a theme, themes are fantastic because you don't have an answer. They're perpetual, they're ongoing questions, and the questions deepen. But I feel like today this is helping me get some perspective on why these kinds of books that we've been reading in book club appeal to me so much, why they're starting to appeal to me more and more, and why my work has literally led me this way. Like, I haven't chosen this, it's just led me this way. And I think it has something to do with, this is the way I feel like you can get at the essential human thing by acknowledging that you can't get to it. Anyway, so yeah, Jess said it gave me more of this book, essentially, is what she said, paraphrasing, but this book gave me more sense of an essence of humanity than any hyper-realistic, detailed work of fiction. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and that's a really important and excellent point. Jess, Sebald argued that writing was a sham, a means of achieving reality through intentional trickery, making us experience reality with a lie. That's amazing. I didn't know he argued that exactly, but wow, that's also an amazing comment. Argued that writing was a sham, a means of achieving reality through intentional trickery. Yeah. I think sometimes when I struggle lately with like realistic fiction and like some of the contemporary stuff, which everyone all the time, I need to qualify some of these statements because it sounds like I have this agenda against, literary realism and fiction. And maybe I do, but I don't really think I do, because some of it I really like. But every generation there is some movement that some writers don't like and think is bad. This has been going on. This is an artistic experience from time immemorial. So I just have my particular take with what's happening now. But when when Sebald says a means of achieving reality through intentional trickery, my discomfort with contemporary literary realism that predominates right now is that because I've been reading, and maybe this isn't because this, but this feels like one of the reasons I can't with that stuff, is that reading so much to figure out how books work, writing so much, figuring out how to make something that has that essence of necessity and mystery and magic in it. You learn how books work, you learn craft moves, but like David Foster Wallace 30 something years ago, there's this discomfort with craft and trickery because you're trying to get at some essence and some human thing, which is filled with, in the end, you can't craft move your way to that. I think with contemporary literary realism, fiction, um, it's very clear for me from sentence one in a lot of these books what the trickery is that Sebald talks about. Whereas nonfiction, maybe because I'm less adept at it, or maybe because this kind of stuff that we're diving into in book club, like When We Cease to Understand the World and About a Mountain and Exteriors, it's doing this thing where like I don't know quite where the trick. I know there's tricks, and I know what's happening. I know that they're happening, but the nonfiction kind of essayistic form, I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm going to get more of your comments, but Girl in Dungarees, we can't observe things while knowing if they are true or false. We can't observe things while knowing if they are true or false. Jess, yeah, I love not knowing what was real or false. Maybe one very intense quantum mechanics nerd who knew all these historical figures was pissed. Yeah, I think I read some comments of people who were like, this book was quantum woo. Someone said this book is quantum woo. It's not real. This doesn't, they were very unhappy with the way that the science and the scientists were depicted in the book. But for your lay person, even like an astute and perceptive lay person, the book was knocked out of the park for me. Nixie, also the Polish title roughly translates to the terrible green or greenery. It's the same word, and I had a hard time making sense of it. Night Gardener reference, perhaps? The planet, the nature? Oh, wow. Whoa, that's cool. Nixie, also the Polish title roughly translates to the terrible green. Wow, that's cool. Huh. The English translators made up their own title. Yeah, When We Cease to Understand the World is actually not that great of a title for me, but the terrible green is, that to me is a much more like book of fiction kind of title, or more like poetic and suggestive. When We Cease to Understand the World is not very compelling of a title to me. But I really like that. That's a cool thing to know. The terrible green. That's interesting. Learner, how can one join this book club? That's a great question, and I'm still trying to figure that out. I feel like this is an elusive and difficult to join book club, which makes it kind of fun. But eventually, in the coming months, at some point in 2025, this book club will likely have a portal, or I don't know what you would call it. It will likely have a presence on Discord or some similar server, so that while we're reading, we can have a discussion kind of column going, and while we stream at the end of the month, we can have other people on camera, or so that you don't have to just be typing in the chat the whole time, because I realize it's pretty one-sided. Like, your comments are powering this. Like we would not be, we're obviously having a conversation, but I'm the only one who can speak. And that's unfair and not as effective as a book club. And I feel like these conversations could be a lot more fun. And valuable if everyone could have the chance to actually speak. Whether you want to be on camera or not, that's totally fine. But Discord would give us a way, I think, or like some sort of Zoom, I don't know how it works, would give us a way so that if you wanted to have, like, we could have a chat throughout the month and you could put all of your takes there, and we could use some of those to talk about the book. But then it would also give us an opportunity for people to like respond and speak instead of have to type. So that will happen. But I take technological advance, very slowly. So just know that it is going to happen, which will make the book club much easier to join and participate in. So let's just enjoy this kind of like mystery club for, the next few months. And then when Discord comes around, things will be a much more clear. But right now, you're part of the mystery and the early beginnings, this like alchemical group that we have right now. And so there will be some sort of badge or something that the early adopters have. Let's see. Jess, I suppose in Sebald's case, I think of his most obvious trickery as the photographs. Like, I am so gullible. I see a photograph and I'm like, yeah, that happened. Yeah, exactly. And that's another cool example of what Labatut was talking about as writing not being this invention for him anymore, but being like taking a walk and picking things up. Sebald obviously finds these photographs. Sometimes I feel like I can tell that the book is propelled, that Sebald's writing this book is propelled by finding a photograph and writing into it and out of it, and then into the next one and out of the next one. And I love that about Sebald. So the original title is A Terrible Greenery. That's good. That's cool to know. Girl in Dungarees, Quantum Woo is so funny. Nixie, okay, we got that. Title. Jess, that's so interesting because I picked up this book for the title. I felt like all of the abstractions and odd connections in the book brought to light how little we do understand the world. So, TJ, I'm in another online book club that meets over Zoom once a month. That works for me. The free version of Zoom limits how long a call can be. Yeah, I think Discord has some sort of video meeting thing, but just know we're gonna make it there. But right now, we're in the very elusive and difficult to join moment in book club history. So this brings me to deciding what we want to read next for the month of May, which is very exciting. I feel like I have 2 ideas, but I also want to hear your ideas if you are interested in these. If you're not, should we read something else? We have been talking a lot about Sebald today. And I've only read Austerlitz by Sebald, and I'm looking at it right now, On the Natural History of Destruction. But I have Sebald's most famous one, The Rings of Saturn. I have Vertigo, and I have The Immigrants. Hold on. I'm pretty sure I have that one. Yeah. I've got Vertigo, Rings of Saturn, and The Immigrants by Sebald. All 3 of those I'd be interested in, and it's kind of based on our theme of book club that is just happening to form. This whole fiction, nonfiction, manipulating fact kind of thing. So, and Sebald, as you know, is an enemy of mine, and it's always great to read your enemies. But an enemy that I'm drawing closer and closer towards. So it's very interesting dynamic. That's an idea. We read Sebald. Another idea I have, because Jess and Connor have asked me about Peter Handke. I love Peter Handke. He is a very interesting writer, and I would say is much closer to, he's writing a lot more fictional work. His work is weird, especially his more recent work. He's like in almost 80 or something. His work is very weird, but he's still, he has this whole fictional world that is just beyond. Peter Handke has also a book of essays, I think called The Jukebox, and other essays on storytelling I've always wanted to read. I don't know if it's like narrative essays, kind of like you could say that About a Mountain was. I don't know what that is like. I know that one of the essays in that book, John DeGata anthologized in one of his essay anthologies. Or we could read some of Peter, like there's a bunch of books that I like by Peter Handke, but there are a bunch, especially his earlier work, that I have not read, like his most famous ones, The Goalie's Anxiety at the Penalty Kick, and the one where he goes to America. I can't remember that one. Let's see. So I don't know. Maybe I can put a vote out on the channel, or if someone's like, let's read Peter Handke this book. Let's read Peter Handke's essays. I want to read that one. Or if someone's like, Sebald, I've always wanted to read The Rings of Saturn. I've always wanted to read The Immigrants. I've always wanted to read Vertigo. If someone has a strong feeling about any of these, make it known. Or a strong feeling like, I have someone else that is very interesting that we should read, make it known, and we'll pick it just based on gut reaction. If you don't have a book if there's not a book that I mentioned that's interesting to you, or you don't have another one that like kind of is falling into this general world that the book club is building, then I say we part ways. I'll make a little voting post or something, and in the next, day, 2-3 days, we could vote on it on the channel. So speak now if you have a strong feeling about a book that you want to read that was mentioned or that you have in mind. And if it feels right, we'll go for it. And if you don't have something in mind, then we'll put it up to vote, and we can all kind of research what books seem interesting to us. And while you're debating on whether you have something in mind, I would just like to say, well, I don't really have anything to say. I would just say, thanks, and this was really fun. Always, I do think that we're heading towards a Discord book club. That is where undeniably we're heading in that trajectory. It may be another couple months before we get there, a month, 2 months. But I hope that this level of participation is still rewarding, and that like you can chat. It's rewarding for me, but I hope that it's rewarding for you. And then eventually when we can get out of like you having to chat in the little chat, but you can actually like, it'll actually be a conversation on Discord throughout the month, and then on video chat where you could either have your screen black and just talk into the microphone and add your voice to the conversation. That seems way better, but I hope that this level of participation is still rewarding, and I hope that it's not just like me rambling on with your good ideas, which is essentially how I well, anyway, I'm reading your comments and getting distracted. So we have Handke's essays sound interesting, but I love how Sebald follows the trajectory we've been on. So maybe a poll is good. I'll wait for the YouTube poll. Asa, no strong feeling but excited. This was great. A poll where we have a few days to vote sounds good. Okay, let's go. Livia Silva says, new here and just want to suggest Clarice Lispector for a future read here. She is the weirdest and most insightful writer. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so I will look into Livia. If you have a Lispector book that you want to add to the mix or suggest adding to the poll, let me know. If not, I will look into her and find something that's intriguing to me, and add that to the poll. But I think we'll add in the poll. We'll add the Lispector book, whichever one seems interesting or that Livia suggests. We'll have a Sebald book, and we will have a Handke book, and we'll vote. And all three of those sound really good to me. So, Livia, if you have a book that you want from Lispector to suggest to the book club, let me know in the chat. And if not, I'll find one to add. But yeah, I'll start a poll today, tomorrow, next day, and we'll see what people want to read. But yeah, I just have to say that this is very helpful, rewarding to me. I feel like the channel in general and the book club specifically has helped me to it's helped me in a lot of ways. I'll just say that. And that's it. Felix, last note, says, I've been in and out, so not sure if it's been explored, but apparently the original title, which is The Terrible Greenery, right? The original title is, let me look, A Terrible Greenery, refers to a vision that Fritz Haber had of the world being overcome by plants due to the new fertilizer. Okay, I remember that. I just bought Agua Viva by Lispector, so look into that one. She has The Hour of the Star, which is her most famous, but it's good, smaller, and a good introduction. This one is bizarre and weird and amazing. Okay, cool. I'll look into Agua Viva, and I'll look into The Hour of the Star. And one of those, or both of those, will be on our poll to choose from for next month. And then one or two of Handke's books we'll put on there. And let's see. Oh, and then Sebald. We'll have maybe like, I don't know. I'm not as interested in the Rings of Saturn yet, but maybe The Immigrants or Vertigo, or The Rings of Saturn. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to say thank you. And I really appreciate everyone for your like very sharp analysis. You're highly valuable, and I'm not just saying this, like the perspectives here are from really astute and just very good readers. And it's not just like that we're picking interesting books or like the reading and the perspectives and your takes and your experiences reading these books are really high level. And that makes these conversations very, very, very interesting. And I think that makes this kind of like, the fuzzy edges of an unestablished book club really fun, because there's few of us, and the few that are here are very motivated and very good readers and good communicators about their feelings and their experiences reading and their ideas from these that come from these books. And that makes me want to hang on to this to this form of book club a little longer, because we've just collected a really good group of people. And so let's just enjoy it. And I will say goodbye. So thanks, Jess. Thanks, Connor. Thanks, Livia. Thanks, Nixie. Thanks, Felix. Thanks, Asa. Thanks to Girl in Dungarees. Thanks to TJ. Thanks to Learner. And I hope that's pretty much everyone. I think that's pretty much everyone. Yeah, I appreciate it. And we will create a poll. We've got the Lispector books, Sebald books, and Handke books.